If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd rather just read about this than actually do it, you're not alone. The Enneagram 5 newsletter exists to help you move from knowing to experiencing. Every Saturday, you'll get insights designed to help fives grow without overwhelm. Sign up for free today at enneagram5.com/newsletter or visit the link in the description. Now on to the show.
You're welcome for that, future Cody, listening to this.
Are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Talking about anxiety. Cody,
Yep.
do I make you anxious?
Sometimes. In what context?
This context.
No.
Okay, good.
It wasn't a good one.
So, Cody,
Yep.
what does it feel like when you're anxious?
Like a 10-year-old is squeezing my neck as hard as they can.
Why a 10-year-old? We're never going to get through this one. So, Cody,
Yeah.
what's something funny about anxiety?
Oh, why funny?
What is happening?
I don't know. I think we just move on.
And I'm an Enneagram 5. Hey, so guess what?
What's that?
I found out I experience anxiety.
How'd you figure that out?
Well, I let myself feel things,
Yeah.
and one of the big things that I feel a lot is anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. That tends to be how it happens.
Yeah, after last summer, with everything that happened and me opening up in that way and stopped running from my trauma and, faced it head on and did the work, start healing. It's been a crazy, wonderful year in that regard.
Yeah.
Really, really hard and just really, really transformative and rewarding. But in that, I really gave myself permission to feel on a level that I hadn't experienced before and discovered how much I actually feel anxiety a lot of the time and how much I have spent so much energy and time wasting trying to avoid that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more of our existence than we think it is. And that's probably true of everybody, but man, of fives especially, I feel like we've got to all fight it somehow because it feels out of control. And so it's kind of like such an antithesis of our fiveness to be feeling anxiety and feeling like you're spiraling, which is often how it feels.
Yeah. And that's the thing is I didn't realize, like I intellectualized it, right?
No.
Yeah. I was like, oh, anxiety is this, and I don't experience this. But I do have all these things, but that doesn't count. And then like I thought my way through of like, oh, I can be rational and reason about this and work my way through, and I don't have anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all nonsense. And then when I started to, really let myself feel, I just had this aha moment of, oh, this is what anxiety feels like. And I know this feeling, but I didn't connect the two, that it was anxiety,
Yeah.
I just thought, my nervous system was stressed at that moment, which is kind of part of anxiety, right? And but I didn't recognize it as that. And I thought that, my superior intellect would allow me to, to get rid of all anxiety in my life because it's all nonsense. And man, man, did I get myself into like a world of hurt.
Yeah, well, and also too, like how much our body remembers these things, and we already don't like feeling our body and acknowledging our body and wanting to be in it. And I think anxiety pulls us into our body so much,
100%.
And or you find that if you try to do the work to be more present in your body, you feel anxiety. Like I think it works both ways. Because the more you explore what your body is feeling and the more you're aware of it, the more you find those places that your body is holding that anxiety, whether it's, I get it a lot in my back and in my neck, I feel whenever I go through a bout of knowing and acknowledging and just being super aware of how anxious I am, it's always that next week I'll throw my back out somehow, or like it's just all of it's just so tense, and so I'll twist wrong or sleep wrong, and it's all over. And so it's usually around that. If I'm having like really bad nerve problems or muscle problems, it's because it's all in there, and it's just that I think there's whole books written about that kind of thing, and which I really should read. I have them. I've tried to read The Body Keeps Score multiple times, and I think I've read the whole book, but in so many parts, because I'm like, I think this is where I was, or I'll just pick up where my bookmark was. I need to read it all at once and like actually absorb it. And so, but that's a great book, but you don't like thinking about your body. Like I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
So often we're just floating heads, right? And that's our dream. That's why float tanks are so appealing to fives. It's a weird thing how anxiety kind of finds you, I think, especially in our kind of current society too, like just the way that things are built, the way that what our days and weeks look like. It's like it's kind of built into the system that we bury that anxiety to function, and that we always feel anxiety.
Yeah.
As in like we're kind of always in that sort of like the survival, like fight, flight, or flight. What is it? Fight, flight, or freeze? Fight, flight, or freeze?
Sure. There we go.
Flight, fright? I don't know.
Flight fright.
this Halloween. Yeah, so I think that we're kind of always in that state, I guess. And I remember reading that somewhere, and it's like we're constantly pushed to that state at least all the time. And so it teaches us to bury those feelings all the time anyway. And as fives, we're like, that sounds great. Let's just keep burying it. And mine, I think I've told this story before. I'm sure I have. And I have a song about it that, anxiety found me in the most intense way when one random like Monday afternoon when I was taking a shower, right? So like you don't know when it happens, but man, when it happens, like for me, it hit me, and I had to live with it every second of every day for about a year, and it would not go away. Like every couple minutes I would rethink of the same. My brain would try to intellectualize it, but because there was an insane amount of trauma around the thing I was feeling anxiety about, it couldn't intellectualize. So every time it would start to think about and process the thoughts, I'd re-enter into a panic state, like a panic attack. And so I didn't know how to process it. And so I think it was just a really new experience for me, and also absolute hell because I was so aware of the anxiety and feeling it in my body at all times. And I've never experienced anything like that before, and have it since, thankfully. But it's crazy how such deep-seated things sometimes with some of us, we experience things, we bury it for so long, and it's so ingrained in us that when it does come out, it's like fully out of control. And it's a terrible experience. It'd be a terrible experience for anybody, I would think.
So I realized that I'm experiencing anxiety a lot, and realizing how much of what I was doing was trying to avoid that feeling.
Yeah.
But I didn't really understand how much I was feeling anxiety until I did not have anxiety for a whole week. I went out to Laguna Beach for work And I was supposed to be doing a presentation at a board meeting on Monday. So I flew out on Friday because I have some friends in the area. And Saturday morning, I met one of them for breakfast. And then we were supposed to meet up later in the day. And then I went to go get lunch by myself, and I was feeling off. Mm-hmm. And I went back to the hotel, and by that evening, I was like full on flu. Like I have not been this sick probably since I was a kid.
Right.
It was awful. And just like full body aches, really intense.
Yeah.
Like my whole spine hurt. Like it was rough. And, then I had, the coughing and the fever, like I know I had to have had a crazy high fever.
Yeah.
I was getting delirious at points. And so I ended up spending 5 days 4 or 5 days in a hotel room, sick as a dog by myself.
Yeah.
And that experience forced me into my body like nothing I had. And I finally got to the point where I just gave in. I surrendered.
Right,
I was like, okay, I'm going to let myself feel this. I'm going to be here experiencing it. And in this like weird way, it almost felt like coming home, and I reconnected with a part of myself that had been so disconnected from.
Huh.
And I didn't really realize it at first, but for the next week after that whole experience, I didn't feel any anxiety. Huh. And it was such a stark contrast that it was so noticeable to me.
Yeah.
Because I would even before that often get like flight anxiety. Well, pre 2020, for whatever reason, whenever I'd fly, I would have some pretty severe flight anxiety, which I hadn't experienced before. And then that went away after this experience too. And so I experienced any anxiety for like a week. And I remember after I came home, our 3-year-old was like, I was sitting there eating at the table, and he just was coming and like jumping on my back and all this stuff, and just, being a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting there casually, nonchalantly having a conversation with Amy, and it was like it wasn't even happening. And she's just like, she's freaking out. She's like, "What is happening right now?" Because normally by that point, I would have like been so on edge after 5 minutes of that.
Yeah.
That I would have either had to I set him aside or go somewhere else or something, because or definitely would not be able to carry on a conversation.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And it was just like nothing was happening, and it didn't feel it. It was so weird, and that's one of the things that really clued me into how my nervous system is a big part of this. And so and once I kind of got back into the like work routine and stuff like that, it started to come back. But ever since I've experienced that, I'm like, okay, my body can get into this state. How can I do it more often, but without being really, really sick?
Yeah.
Anxiety is a weird one for me. I think I would probably have told you that I don't experience a lot of anxiety, but I think it's because I've always been able to pretend it doesn't exist. The more I acknowledge that anxiety is real and something is making me feel uncomfortable, it's almost like a deer freezing kind of a reaction, where I can't necessarily even focus my thoughts into one spot. It's kind of scattered. And what I've learned over the years is that I really need to listen to how it feels in my body, which really isn't the easiest thing for me to do. But it's the focus, and it's what I'm working on. And hopefully I'll be able to actually identify that the anxiety exists and be able to identify where it's affecting me in my body. Is it in my head? Is it a headache? Is it in my stomach? Is it a stomach ache? It's new, and I'm old enough to know better, but here we are.
Anxiety shows up for me with loss of focus. That's usually the first thing that happens, and I am sort of moving frantically through whatever I'm doing at the time, it's typically related to work, usually. That's where most of the anxiety comes from. And, or being given something that I've never done and having to figure it out really quickly and remain billable. So I lose focus and I get frantic. And then, so I frantically try to look up tutorials and look up videos and read as much as I can, just really quickly all at once. And it's really not very productive. And I kind of feel it in my body. If I'm paying attention, I will feel it just kind of in my chest. It'll feel like a shock. And then, so I'll go along being frantic for a little while. And then sometimes I will just sort of shut down and really not be able to do anything and start procrastination. And then I tell myself I need to go take a break or whatever. And really, it's just the only thing that's very productive in getting out of that for me is to go take a walk or move my body in some way and sort of check in with myself, like, what's happening? Why are you, losing focus? Just kind of have that conversation with myself and try to figure out how it started and just admit, sometimes just saying it out loud to myself, admitting that I'm actually having anxiety about something or I'm worried about something or don't think I can do whatever is being handed to me in the frame of time that I'm allotted. That's typically how it works for me.
So I've experienced fleeting moments of that. A lot of it comes through different things that I've been doing with meditation or with the cold plunging and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Breath work a lot.
Yeah.
But that experience changed me though, because it gave me, it showed me what it's like to be anxiety free for a little bit.
Yeah.
I felt like I had superpowers, man. It was
I bet.
if I could just live this way, how much I would do or not do,
Yeah.
just how much more I would probably enjoy life.
Yeah. And I mean, I wish I could figure that out. I've tried a lot of those things as well, not consistently enough that it probably made much of a difference, but I did also get on 2 different anxiety medications and that worked really well. So that's my story. Feeling anxiety.
Are you feeling better? Like you said, what does it mean for it to work really well?
Well, so what I was experiencing was an interesting, what I found was that I had a base level of anxiety that didn't feel connected to anything. It was just constantly happening. And it was feeling like your heart kind of gets up into the bottom of your neck and you just feel that tension. And I went to almost like a stereotype. I went to the doctor, is there something wrong with my heart? And they were like, do you feel anxious? Well, I don't know what anxiety is. So I don't know if I feel anxious. And at this point, I really didn't know. But it was because of the panic attacks that I had that I was there was some kind of extreme happening and I wasn't really sure. And part of it may have been also related to high blood pressure, which I found out that I had during that time too. And so, they put me on some blood pressure meds and that also kind of helped alleviate some of that. But yeah, and I got lucky. The first couple of anxiety meds that I tried really worked for me. And I know that's not everybody's journey. It sometimes can be really hard to find something that works. But it did treat that base level where it put me back into a place where I was then able to even mentally address the panic attack anxiety, which was a completely different bubble of trauma and triggers and things that was causing it. And so, but I think part of it was I couldn't really address it because I was always in a state of anxiety, and I was like that for a long time. And of course, it wasn't until a lot of processing and therapy too that I was like, oh, I've had anxiety since I was born. There was moments, all of a sudden, all these things started coming up where I was thinking about how I was as a kid and how that tied into, always control things, what kind of anxiety meltdown I would have if my mom didn't sit me down and tell us everything we were doing that day, everywhere we had to go, what all of the errands were. And if anything went out of order or anything changed, I would lose my mind. And this was at 3 and 4 years old. Granted, that also sounds a lot like Asperger's. And so, being on the spectrum probably has a lot to do with my anxiety. And so I think it was really hard to narrow down in the beginning, what was going on and even how to begin to address it. And it took a while. It was kind of just a lot of exploration trying to figure out how to address it.
With the meds, do they just dull the anxiety or do they dull other things too? I think that's been my main concern in trying them.
Depends on
Just
the
like personally.
yeah, and it depends on the medication too. I'm on the I think it's like the generic version of Wellbutrin, and for me, it works really well in only doing and like only attacking the anxiety, and then I didn't feel any difference otherwise, except for that maybe I felt a little bit more emotionally equipped to handle really stressful situations too. but I could, and I wouldn't say that it actually takes away the anxiety. That's the weird part. It just makes me. It's almost like it separates me from it, if that makes sense. Like I can detach from that anxiety and not necessarily feel it, but I don't know if it's really ever gone. I think it's more like subdued. And you know, there's times and trigger, you know, whenever things happen in my life that I'm reminded of unresolved trauma in my past. I think that there's also, it's just really hard to go back and forth on what the big traumas are and what the small traumas are. But if I've got the small trauma under control or at least subdued a little, then the big traumas don't feel so big, if that makes sense. Like before, it would feel like I was spiraling out of control. Whereas now I feel like shallower, shorter breaths. Like I feel like I can't get a good breath. I feel like really like almost hypomanic, and it kind of gives me a different feeling when I'm feeling a lot of anxiety. Whereas like before, it would be like I was having a full on meltdown and I thought I was having a heart attack. Like am I dying? It was the level of anxiety I was feeling. And so in that way, I guess it brings all of it down just a little bit. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So do you think we're more susceptible to anxiety as fives than maybe some other types because of how much we live in our heads?
Yeah, I'd say so, for sure. Yeah, because I mean, like we were saying in the beginning, like the less in touch with your body you are, the easier it is to hide that anxiety. And because I think my thing is, I think that most people at some point in their life feel anxiety and have an issue with anxiety, but we all handle it differently. And fives don't handle it because we aren't. That mind body connection is oftentimes severed on purpose. Like we're always like I think of it like, when you cinch a water hose, we're just always cutting off that flow, and trying not to acknowledge it. And because of that reason, anxiety is just another thing in the body. I don't want to acknowledge sickness or anxiety or what other ailments might be going on in my body. Like that's separate. I don't need to deal with that, And so I think that it's so easy to just kind of dump it all in the same bucket and not worry about it.
There was a study I'd heard about a while back, and I'm probably going to botch the details on this. Maybe I can look it up and share it at some point, and everybody can fact check me. But my main takeaway from it was that the anticipation of an electric shock causes more trauma, much more trauma than the actual shock itself.
Yeah, I remember reading that, like the whole study and thing, how they did like measured it, and
which is crazy.
Yeah,
and I think that's a big part of how we experience anxiety as fives. Is it's all in that anticipation of the really bad thing, and then oftentimes the really bad thing never even happens, but we do so much damage to ourselves in sort of living in that space.
And physically doing damage.
Yeah.
Like it actually, anxiety often is the reason we die earlier. It's kind of crazy.
And if we would just let ourselves experience the things, like it'd take way less toll on us.
Man, it sounds so easy.
I know, right?
If we would just experience the things we're experiencing. But man, like that taps into so many fears though. Like, and I think that's oftentimes at least what holds me back is, so much of my life have avoided feeling just because of what it might mean if I feel them, right? And it's and also too like how we project. Like I've definitely talked about this before. Like when people get upset or when they're crying, and like I'm not empathizing with what they're crying about, so I'm like, stop crying. I don't want you to cry. This is annoying. This is really inconvenient for me right now. And so, I feel like projecting that and knowing how I feel about other people feeling things is, turn it on yourself. It's amplified by 100, right? Like I'm not going to feel anything. I'm not going to be that weak and just be pouring my emotions all over the place for everybody's inconvenience, and I think that, that kind of plays into it a little bit, is like kind of the fears of what it might mean if we feel the things and deal with it. And what will that uncover?
Yeah, 100%.
What else have I buried under there that I forgot about? You start digging them all up. I don't know. Just leave that dirt settled.
Yeah, I think a big fear that I've had before when trying to address my anxiety is that being reliant on other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, a place I go to a lot is that story that I don't need anyone and that I can handle it on my own. And, I am not going to be a burden on other people. And, and therefore I can use that excuse and say that, other people's anxiety are a burden on me, and then I don't have to deal with those either. And there's just there's something in there, that lie of, self-reliance that has definitely put some roadblocks there for me in trying to deal with the anxiety on my part.
Yeah, and it connects to so many parts of our life, all of our relationships, everything. It starts affecting, because I can definitely feel a lot of anxiety, and I want to pull away. I feel like if I just get into my safe space,
right,
where everything makes sense, then it'll be a lot easier to kind of just deflate this balloon, but it doesn't work that way. We need other people, and that sucks, and I don't like it. And it puts you in a place of emotional vulnerability, which nobody likes.
Right.
I won't say nobody, but I don't know about any fives, at least. I definitely don't like it.
I'm working my way up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I at least don't abhor it now.
Yeah. I feel it's like when you going to the gym. Like, I don't want to go to the gym. I dread going to the gym, but when I do go to the gym, I usually leave going, I'm glad I went to the gym. And I feel, and you feel a lot of those same almost like euphoric feelings sometimes when you do open up and you do allow for those moments for people to kind of come in. And a lot of times I feel like what we need the most from other people is just someone that will break our own inner narrative. Like, because we're, a lot of our anxiety, I feel like for me, a lot of my anxiety spirals out of control when those lies keep repeating themselves in my head of like whatever I think it is, or whatever it's speaking to about fears of something, or whatever the issue is. And in reality, is any of that stuff probably going to happen? No. And so having somebody else be like, what? That's what no, right. Like, why would you think that's going to happen? And like just hearing that, you're like, oh, okay, maybe I'm overreacting.
Yeah.
And that's like everyday basic anxiety. That's not like trauma anxiety.
Right. But there's definitely a difference. Dude, have you seen Inside Out 2 yet?
I have not.
Oh my God. I lost it. We went and took the kids to the theater to watch it. I spent half the movie just like tears rolling down my face.
Yep.
Because they introduce a new character. Wonder what it is.
Yep.
And oh man, so relatable. So bad.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's just all about that fear of the future, like what's going to happen, and doing all these calculations to try to figure it out. And then we just like fry our brains. Yeah.
Yeah. And break our own hearts, literally, very physically. I need to watch it. I need to watch it for sure. It's been on my list, but it's definitely a struggle feeling afraid of even dealing with the anxiety. I think it's just such a loop we can get into for ourselves, and feeling like dealing with the anxiety makes us less than, I think is also like something for me. It's like, if I'm already thinking about it as a weakness, then why would I want to talk about it and bring it up if it makes me look like it makes me feel inadequate, or makes me feel like I'm not enough? And that's definitely part of I think the fear of wanting to even deal with the anxiety, and why I buried it to begin with. And it's just like, it tackles all of those insecurities when you deal with it, because I feel like it's like something that's a center point that everything comes, like it all ties to that thing, or at least it has its own like arms and everything, you know what I mean? All these different buckets, and that kind of affects, it poisons the water and the whole thing, right? And so it's just like a cancer that just eats through all of your emotions.
Fun.
Yeah. But that, now obviously I'm talking more at that point. I mean, sure, everyday anxiety maybe, but like definitely like anxiety that's stemming from some type of trauma in your life, that's a completely different beast that takes so much work. But like, if you don't, it really does eat away at you. Like, there's just so many parts of your personality that don't get to flourish, because it's constantly having to put all these resources into managing this thing that you're trying to keep captive and not let it out of the box. It's like a Pandora's box, right?
I went to try this new to me kind of thing. I thought I was going to do a chiropractor. It ended up not really being a chiropractor. And basically, I lay on this table and take deep breaths and focus on my breath. And then they come and like do little like minor stretches and taps on my back.
Yeah.
And I'll roll over, they do it on my rib cage too. And it's the way he explained it is like bringing my awareness to these places to let my body heal itself, especially in the nervous system. You know, it sounded a little woo-woo, but I was open to it. And I definitely noticed some shifts for me. And
really, how so?
Just not as on edge all the time. Now, it's hard because I was doing other things at the same time.
Sure.
So, you know,
so you don't know what it was.
I don't know exactly what it was. I do know that my body's kind of craving it. I can tell. Like when I think about it, it's like, I need to do that again.
Oh.
Like my body's telling me that.
Yeah.
So maybe there is something to it. I don't know.
Well, I think about like all those studies that came out about like tapping on your face to relieve anxiety in your forehead. Like there's pressure points in your forehead for sure. But like they talk about that. Yeah, it's some kind of a exercise that you can do when you're feeling anxiety, because they teach children this about like tapping. It's like tapping on your forehead and your cheekbones and like around this part of your face, and it's supposed to like drop your blood pressure and relieve anxiety. And it also helps you to focus, and like there's all these things that it all these benefits to it that supposedly is what they say. But it's like a pretty common practice, I think. And so it's like it's not as like out there woo-woo as anymore as it maybe was at one point, but because I've heard about it from multiple places now, and I've always kind of like tried it, you know, like to see what it does. And it is something about bringing your attention to something and focusing on it kind of makes everything else fade a little. And like and so at the very least for me, it's almost just like a centering exercise where it's kind of like, if you do something like that, I think it does kind of like help center you at the very least.
Yeah, there's something about when your out breath is longer than your in breath. Like you can't be in that sort of panic state. Like your body won't let you when you slow down your breathing, but there's something about your exhale being a little bit longer than your inhale.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that they would have me do when I'm on the bench or on the table. And it's supposed to kind of get you into that, like, they kept using the word parasympathetic state. So I like that kind of almost theta brainwave state.
Yeah.
So I've also been doing Wim Hof. So, you know, I've been doing...
What is that?
So it's I guess... Well, technically that's a guy's name, but he developed this breathing technique. And I do that before I do cold plunging, which I've been doing a lot of lately. And so basically you do 30 breaths where you inhale really deeply and then just kind of like relax and let it out and don't try to push it out.
Okay.
And you do that 30 times in kind of rapid succession. All right. And then you, on the last one, you exhale all the way and then you hold your breath for as long as you can.
Yeah.
And I've gotten up to like a minute and a half.
Holding out your breath.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exhale is crazy.
Like no oxygen in your body.
Well,
that's
you
longer
do,
than I
you
can
do
probably
have a
hold
lot.
my breath in.
Yeah, you do have a lot because of how you've been doing those breaths beforehand. But you're not taking any in, so you're just
Is it just like absorbing the oxygen? Is what it is? Like
I
it's
don't
in your bloodstream.
I don't know what's going on.
It's kind of strange.
But
I was thinking, like if you're doing it really fast, maybe it's like a way of like getting it into your bloodstream. Maybe there's oxygen in your blood, but not in your lungs.
I guess. And then after you kind of hit where you can't hold it anymore, you take a big breath in and hold that for like 15, 20 seconds. And then you squeeze your whole body while you're doing it. And then you just relax. And so that's one round. And you do that 3 times.
Wow.
And by the end, it's like, I feel like I'm on something. Like I am like seeing spots, but I'm like tingles all over my body.
Yeah.
But it's just this like such relaxed, almost high kind of a feeling.
Like reset your nervous system.
It feels like it.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And so when I get in the ice, I think it's not quite as a shock to my system. I mean, it still sucks.
Sure.
But it's, yeah.
You know, a funny thing, how I learned about this. So there's a guy that he was a contestant on Survivor a few seasons ago. And I followed him on Instagram and found out after the season was over and everything, because he would get all the contestants from that season together and he would do this. But apparently he had taught classes on exactly this. Like, so I remembered him talking about the breathing, the whole exercise, and then plunging right after. And so it's exactly that thing, whatever this thing is. And so that's the first time I ever heard about it. And I thought, that sounds crazy. And then the more I saw his videos on it, I was like, kind of want to try it now. It sounds really interesting. So yeah, it is really fascinating that it would work. I would love to experience because I hate the cold. Like I hate it. It makes me angry. Like I just have I want to throw things. Like I just don't like cold water. And so the thought of doing it,
you got to come try, man.
I do. But the thought of doing it as a part of the experience from the breathing too, I think that's like an interesting experiment. I just want to see how it feels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I don't usually get too anxious. Anxiety is fear about the uncertainty of the future. And a few years ago, I decided to switch off most of the things that keep my anxiety levels high and aren't directly related to me, like the news, social media, or the pointless notifications on my phone. Of course, I still find myself sometimes in the anxiety bouts. For example, when I make a mistake to post something on Reddit. But now I pay close attention to my inner state, and when I feel uneasy or too nervous, I force myself to quit. I also try not to care too much about the things I've got no control of, and instead control my reactions to them. Doesn't always work, but works well enough.
I know I'm anxious when I start researching every possible thing there is to research regarding the thing that I'm anxious about. And I also go into my 6-wing more, and I start to feel like more of a 6 or a 5-wing 6 than a 5. And then I start to question basically everything that I can question about whatever I'm anxious about. And that's how I know that I'm going down the rabbit hole, because I can't stop looking things up or trying to find the answers, and it feels like an urgent need to find the answers right away.
For me, anxiety can show up in a variety of ways. When I was younger, it showed up a little bit differently than it does for me now. When I get overwhelmed in like crowded spaces, like parties or bars, I will just kind of stand still in my own space and breathe for a second and forget everybody else exists. And then I'll, come back to the party or whatever's going on. But I definitely, like right now, I'm going through a really stressful and anxious situation at work, and I'm just working from home and can't go into the office. I don't feel comfortable. I was in there yesterday and was so anxious that I felt it in my body, and that's not a normal thing for me. Normally, I'm very forgetting that I even have a body, but I couldn't ignore it. I ignored it so much when I was in college that I was so stressed and anxious that I developed a stomach ulcer without even realizing how stressed I was. And then at the end of that journey, I ended up running away to Salt Lake City, Utah for 10 days, just on a whim. And then I came back. And here we are, still learning to deal with stress and anxiety. So that's fun.
Okay, so we've talked about what it feels like to really feel anxiety and be very anxious.
And not want to deal with it.
and not want to deal with it. What are some experiences you've had where you've noticed the anxiety not be there or be so diminished it's not really an issue? Like, what does that feel like for you? What are you able to do in that state?
I'm allowed to talk about it? Well, anytime I've ever taken THC
right.
or shrooms, I feel zero anxiety. And honestly, shrooms was the best experience because I felt no anxiety for days afterwards. It's like, and I've read studies on how psychologists and doctors are starting to use like a pill form of shrooms, all natural, to microdose so small you don't feel any psychoactive effects, but it reduces anxiety and makes you, it puts you into a state in which you are much more able to handle emotions and actually feel them and deal with them and explore them. And so it makes sense perfectly that would happen. But, you know, it's funny. I think about there's random times in my life that I remember feeling no anxiety. One of them was I'll go in chronological order. Go back to a few years ago. I was kayaking down one of the main rivers, the Ocoee River here, and we were kind of kayaking and just floating down, really. And there was a point in which, for whatever reason, I was in the water. I think I was just hanging onto a tube, and Madison she was in his kayak and just pulling me. And I was like, this is the best. And so I was just floating, and it's so deep, and so where we were, and so I remember there was this point where all the trees were like coming up over the river, and it was just like shaded, and it was really hot out, but the water was really cold, and it was just this experience of like euphoric, like it's so much so that I knew it's like you ever been in a moment where like your brain's writing it as a core memory when it's happening.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like, and I think whenever that happens, for the most part, it's usually in those almost euphoric moments where you're just so relaxed and also so present. Like you're able to take in that information and absorb it without over processing, and you're just in the moment and you're just there. And granted, I've probably had THC in my body at that point too, but there's something about it that like those moments that always stick in my brain. And another one was on my bachelor trip when we were at the beach.
Yes.
With the lo-fi beats just playing in the speaker. It was cool. It wasn't too hot. And we were just all hanging out and just sitting there.
That was the best.
Yeah.
That was the best.
It was THC that time too.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's like and in those moments, I long for those moments. Like,
yep.
Oh my God. I do find that they seem to happen more often now, but I think it's because there are times where I can get to a place.
You're just high all the time?
No, but it doesn't hurt. It's being conscious of those moments and being able to be present enough to acknowledge when you can, like, when to feel those moments. And I think that the more aware you are, the more those moments will happen, because there's a certain gratefulness for life and for living that comes with those moments. And I think that I've been feeling that a lot more, especially as I get older and you just think about aging and how life is. You start thinking about kind of what life is and how to be appreciative of it and to be grateful for the people in your life and everything good in your life. Kind of helps me to kind of help those anxious feelings subside on their own. And then I can take in that information and just be in the moment and enjoy it for what it is. And yeah, it's hard to do though. Like it sounds like a guru type thing, and I definitely can't do it all the time. So like, let's not set me up to be a guru, but
nobody was doing that.
Okay, I'm glad.
Oh, that was good. The first time I remember experiencing this was the night that Amy was in labor with our first.
Wow. Okay.
Because I was her birth coach. We got there and like to the birthing center, and it was because we really wanted to have the baby in the birthing center and not in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of attached to a hospital, and the policy was at like 41 weeks and 6 days. Like that's your limit. If you go to 42 weeks, like you have to go to the hospital. And we were at 41 weeks, 6 days in the evening when we drove to the birth center because she had started labor.
So if it had happened 8 hours later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
We're doing all the tricks to try to get that thing started.
Yeah.
And we went to the birth center, and we got there and she was only 1 centimeter.
Oh.
And the midwife, normally they probably would have sent us home, but she knew that like we were at that deadline, so she let us stay like this just to kind of see if it would progress. Mm-hmm. And we did really well. And so, but it was just me and Amy in a dimly lit room. The midwife came and checked on us maybe once an hour, but from, I don't know, like 11 o'clock at night until like 6:30ish in the morning, we labored together. You know, I was with her and I was, you know, holding her and helping her get into different positions and putting pressure on her back. She had really bad back labor, and it was just like, and her contractions, they started at like 3 minutes apart. Like they didn't like increase really in that regard. They just increased in intensity. So it was just like for like 8 hours, she was every 3 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, she was having these like really, really bad contractions with back labor and everything. And it was, And so I was like with her in that, and it was this very primal experience. And that was the first time I really remember being in the moment, being present, being in my body for a sustained period of time.
Yeah.
And it felt amazing. And then one of the nurses just like completely ruined it. I was so upset because I had, like, Amy wanted it filmed. And so I had set up my brother's GoPro, and I didn't have, I never used one before, and I didn't know how long the battery lasted, and it barely lasted at all. And so when it was time to start pushing, like I went to go try to turn it on, and it was dead.
Yeah.
And so then I tried to, so then I'm like panicking because I knew this was important, and I didn't have a backup plan. And so I like propped my phone up on the counter and hit record. And in that, there were a couple interactions with this nurse where, so I had taken my phone out to start videoing and stuff, but I only did it because I knew that Amy wanted me to do it. But it looked as if I was leaving my wife in labor to try to take like mess with my phone. And like the nurse made little comments and stuff about it. And so I had propped it up on the counter to record and to go back over with Amy, and she moved my phone. And like basically put it down to where we didn't capture any of it. But and at that point I was already like holding Amy. I couldn't do anything about it, and I saw it. And so I missed this moment because it pulled me out because I was so upset.
Yeah.
You know, and I got back in my head.
Right.
And so then that part of it was it just was like a blur to me. But leading up to that was just this, it's hard to even put into words. I felt so connected at this like base, deep, spiritual, physical level.
Yeah.
And it felt amazing. And again, that's not something I would be able to or want to replicate on a day-to-day basis.
Right. It's a lot.
Like, how do you like use other techniques to kind of get you closer to that? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense feeling. It's like saying, I want to experience ayahuasca every day.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I've thought about trying ayahuasca at some point in my life. Do I want to do that all the time? Like, I've heard it's a pretty intense experience. And that's what that feels. That's what it sounds like. That was what it was reminding me of when you're telling me this story, because I was kind of feeling anxiety thinking about it. But but yeah, I don't know. It is. I definitely notice that when I try to deal with that anxiety and I try to get past it, and because I mean, the thing that anxiety does for me the most is definitely takes me out of the moment, and that's kind of what you experienced, right? Like suddenly that anxiety of the phone now is entered in, and like cancer spread to everything and ruined it. And I think that it ruins connections with your family. It ruins it, it's so hard to build those connections. And if you're us being in the place that we are in our life now, it's like, I want to find those deeper connections. I want to grow emotionally. I want to find, that the next level of human existence, I guess,
Yeah.
And to get to that growth, you can't go there with anxiety. You can't take it with you. And so it's just so hard.
Oh man, I just had a realization while we were talking here, because you said that anxiety pulls you out of the moment. I don't think that's what happens. I think that it's our response to the anxiety that pulls us out of the moment.
Yeah.
Because the anxiety is actually a signal to like pull us in to the moment. But we treat it, but because it's so uncomfortable for us, because it's pulling us into our bodies, we treat it as a signal to like remove ourselves from the moment. And so maybe if we can learn to stop that signal, like short that circuit, and we can retrain ourselves to view it as an opportunity to lean in,
Yeah.
then maybe that would help a lot.
Sounds like a software update. You think you just like plug that into my brain?
Well, we're coding it up right now.
Yeah. It's like, how the hell do you do that? Focus on that part of it.
I mean, it's more figuring out how to trigger that anxiety in a controlled manner on a regular basis. So that's why I do cold plunging. That's why I do the breath work, because there's even with the breath work, it's that moment of I feel like I'm going to die because I can't breathe, but and so my body starts to panic, but I can talk myself through that and like calm my body and know that I am fine, you know. And it's that just finding things to do like that where you can sort of like rewire those like neural connections.
Yeah.
I think is a way to go about that. Or at least I've noticed it's improvements for me in doing that.
Yeah, just like that pattern interrupt.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
I primarily have had anxiety in my life around my physical body and social inclusion as a disabled person. The issue of whether my body works the same way as abled people and whether and how that means I can be included with others in social activities, normal things like school and work, has been this huge shaping theme in my life. Social inclusion has always been difficult, and maybe even wouldn't say it's anxiety, it's just the anticipation of rejection. I assume that I'll be rejected by my peers, in part because it's difficult to include me, in part because I've been isolated so long because of disability that it is actually difficult for me to interact, or at least I feel it is. How have I reacted to this? Well, I mastered the art of detachment. You detach in terms of what's visible, but you also detach within yourself, I think. Someone does. I do. Let's say, make it personal. I do. I detach within myself, which is just a draining of all interest in whatever it is, and just a removal of all emotion about it. And that's completely, visible to people. Just not even making like I don't care, just actually I cease to care about whatever it is.
Anxiety shows up for me, I guess, in situations where I feel ill-prepared or like I don't understand the assignment, I guess. And I guess this can show up in social settings, professional settings, and even in a lot of ways, sometimes worse, in family settings where I feel maybe my expectations aren't being met. And it hit me very badly in college when I first, left home, went to college when I was 17 on my own. And I quickly found a way to deal with that, and that was alcohol. And from there, I developed a pretty mean habit, and I was an alcoholic. In 2015, I was diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder. And 2016, I went completely sober. And then between 2016 and 2022, I had a series of seizures, about 7 total. My nervous system was just a mess. And I started to realize just in the last couple of years, since my last seizure, that anxiety really was the trigger for all of that. And I really needed to get a grip on how to handle anxiety and not just write it the way I used to. I would write it in just sort of a hypermania kind of way. I was a lead in every play, the top of the class kind of stuff. But the underlying feeling was always just nerves. But now I just deal and respond to anxiety by identifying the trigger or what it is that's causing the feelings, and then identifying those feelings and being like, this is the way I feel. And a lot of times I have to just let it be. And I've learned to just leave it on the table and just know there's some things out of your control.
One lesson that I learned in this journey over the last year with anxiety is that it helps a lot to also like just be open about it.
Yeah.
Like I was struggling with a lot of anxiety around work and just some different things that were going on there. And it made it so hard for me to stay engaged because I was experiencing so much anxiety. So there was that, my response to that is to pull back, but then I'm like, but I can't pull back because it's my job. And so then I have to everything takes so much effort to like to do as a result of that, because you're spending so much energy first just to like, re-engage.
Yeah.
And then like, what do you have left? And then you start having a whole other set of anxiety around, well, guess what? Now I'm not going to be able to do as well at my job,
right?
Which then just like sets this whole trigger again and makes the anxiety even worse. And I was just spiraling.
Yeah.
And then you feel like, especially when you're in a leadership position, it's like, I can't talk about it. And, cause I need to be, I need to be strong and confident for my team.
You're the beacon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I can't share it with my coworkers or share it with my boss. And it's just, which makes it even worse.
Right.
And then I just started having conversations and realized, hey, guess what? Pretty much everyone else experiences this too.
Yeah.
And it helps. And then by like showing as an example, like you can talk about it and just get it out on the table and then, acknowledge it, and then you can move forward. And when you do that, then that sends a signal that it's a safe place for other people to do that, which means they're getting their anxiety out and they're not holding it in, which just sort of frees us all up. And so the more that we do that, I think the better we'll be.
Definitely more efficient.
Yeah. I mean,
if you need an incentive.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not saying like dump your trauma on everybody, but but there's at least a way to get like that release valve.
Yeah, I mean, things fester in isolation.
Yeah.
They just do, and like that's where all of those like untrue narratives like build, right? And I think that yes, bring it out into the light, let people hear it, but also too, I think that you're right. Like it's crazy how helpful it's been at different points in my life to find that we are all just going through something. All of us are at all different times, and we usually have experienced the thing all together. And it's so easy to feel alone in that, I think, if you're not bringing it up. So that's definitely something that it's good. I've tried to watch out for.
Yeah, and there's the feeling alone, and then there's also the lie that you tell yourself that no one else will understand, because that gives you an excuse to stay in it,
Oh, and like there's that weird twist too of like a little bit of superiority, like just another thing that you're keeping from people. So you're like, I'm the dark, troubled soul, that's like, for me, it's like, I'm the dark, troubled artist. I always have been. I knew it. I found the Johnny Cash in part of my soul. It's easy to idolize those characters in movies and TV shows when you see, examples of them. And so, it's like, you think that that's just like the best way to handle it. Yeah. I'm going to drink my whiskey in a hole in the wall bar and just like drink my anxiety.
Yeah. How's that work out?
It doesn't work out well. I no longer drink alcohol. I had to eliminate that entire thing from my life.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and it's like, it's like, it's just really hard to not, I mean, we're also just naturally overthinkers. And I think that that's also such a huge part of how we can feel. Like, I wonder how often I spiral up my own, I spin up my own anxiety just because I'm overthinking something. I felt anxiety. I think it's been seasons now since I talked about this, but back in the day, I remember I can still feel that anxiety of trying to figure out how to make a live stream work because of all the pieces and constantly, and like when I can't solve the puzzle quick enough, you know what I mean? And like, but that applies to anything in life. If anything is this problem that I can't really figure out how to solve, and I'm looking at it from all angles, and I'm trying to, you start overthinking, and that causes anxiety too, because then you feel like you're losing control.
Right. And that's actually with my job, the main source of the anxiety was it was a puzzle I felt like I didn't know how to solve. It was like I finally came across a problem that I couldn't solve.
Yeah.
And it was the worst.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? I still haven't solved it, but I've at least made progress.
Yeah,
you know,
that's good. Yeah,
yeah.
But it's hard to not let like the negative parts of our personality come out too, like trying to be a perfectionist, and like you just start like spiraling out of control. And it's and for me, that's just like that's definitely what I struggle with. If I stop talking to people and you find me just trying to create some new system or workflow for something in my office, and I've been working on it for days at a time, you're like, it's time to stop me and go, what's wrong? What's going on in your life? Because something has led me. It's driven me to that point. Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I think that's been one of the biggest things is like trying to be more present, trying to be mindful of not trying to overthink, not trying to spin out of control. And also the mindfulness piece is a really interesting thing, because I feel like it's such an easy thing for us as fives to not want to be mindful, because, you know, again, being mindful means being in touch with your body and your surroundings and all of those things. And that just also so happens to be how you diffuse an anxiety attack. So if you're ever having one, I remember I've had a few anxiety attacks at this point, and I found it's good to, like, you know, I literally just sit down on the ground, put my hands on the ground, and just think about where I am and what's going on around me. I'm in a safe place, like, you know, and it's like it's centering yourself on like being just feeling your surroundings is something that I found just kind of settles everything and like slows my heart rate. And I learned that from a TV show. But then of course you did. Of course I've read about it, but I was like, oh, I remember thinking, oh, that's accurate. But when I think about it, I remember it, and it was from it was from the Newsroom. Yeah. An Aaron Sorkin show, of course.
Of course it was.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think there's definitely things that we can do to try to like be more aware of things that, because as a listener, I'm sure that you have experienced anxiety. So I hope that you're maybe in a place that you want to deal with it and try to be better at managing it, because it sure does poke at a lot of the things that we don't want to experience or deal with. You know, it enhances all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, in our response to it, normally what we end up doing is severing that connection.
Yeah.
Which is where we miss out on the fullness of life. So we're kind of separating in all aspects.
Yeah.
We really give into the anxiety. So
I think it's worth saying too that, like, I think we've talked to a lot of fives since we started this show.
Yeah.
A lot of fives. And we got to hear a lot of conversations and hear a lot of responses in every episode and find out about so many other perspectives from a five, or vantage points, I guess you could say, you know, from different fives on how they see things. And something that I've definitely felt like a strong kinship from is that I feel like all of us, one of the biggest misconceptions about fives and why people don't understand us is because it's not that we want to sever those connections. I think fives uniquely can interpret more information a lot of times than other personality types. I think that we are so observant. We have the ability to be superheroes and take in so much about a moment and appreciate so much about a moment and all the details and remember those things, and then find ways to then put that back out into the world in our relationships or in our work or in, you know, creating art or whatever that thing is. You know, we might even have, as everyone does, we have our own unique perspective on that. And fives at their best can deal with these things. We can feel those emotions, but maybe we can feel them even more intensely, and maybe find better ways to manage those feelings and like be experts in feeling things. Yeah. You know, there's ways to be. It doesn't make you less of a five or less of a cerebral type or less of an intellectual to feel. It actually makes you more of those things.
Yeah. And it makes you more whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've got to lean into letting go. Lean into letting go.
That's our next book. Lean into Letting Go by Josiah Goff.
Oh God, it's getting late. I think you had said that we don't want to sever those connections, but that's how we try to maintain control. And so I think if there's one big takeaway, it's that you've got to give in to the chaos.
Yeah. Much like me in that river, you just got to let yourself go with the flow.
Yeah.
You got to go with the flow. Man, it's such a great place to be because, like, I'd venture to throw this out there to all listeners. I bet the majority of us can think of a time in our life where we felt the most blissful or the most, relaxed or content. And in that moment, were you going with the flow? Or is that a moment that was your pattern interrupt? Was that you decided to let go in that moment and just let it be what it is? Because I would just venture to say that was probably a component of that, if not the proponent of making that moment happen.
I wonder if disintegrating a little bit to 7 helps us with that.
Ooh, that's a good conversation.
Yeah.
Because we always look at disintegration as an unhealthy or bad thing, but
there are positives. There are positives
parts
to it. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I would say that's probably true because in my most disintegrated times in my life, even if I was being unhealthy, I was being carefree and I was being like, it is what it is. And so I think even in my most unhealthy places, I had that component of, and maybe that's what made it feel so good. That was what was the release, the emotional release, was that I was doing the thing that I probably should have been doing all along, but in the wrong context.
Yeah.
It wasn't helping me, it was hurting me. But in the right context, that same behavior could be the most healthy thing you do.
Just let go, everybody.
Just let go. We'll just let go, and hopefully we'll be happier. I don't know. Hopefully we accomplish something with this conversation.
I don't know. Do we ever?
Do we? I hope so. Everybody's still here with us, I hope. Well, hey, welcome to Season 5.
Season 5.
Season 5. It's good to be back. It was an intense conversation to have in the beginning about something we, again, don't understand all of.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. See you next week.
Hey, it's Cody, and I wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode. I also want to give a special thanks to our community members who shared their voice with us. If you enjoyed this episode and you're the type of person who likes helping others, would you do us a favor and share it with other people like you? If you found value in this conversation, they will too. If anything in this conversation has resonated with you, or if you have any further thoughts or questions, I want to invite you to join our community of other people like you and continue the conversation at Enneagram5.com.